Good morning. I'd like to take a few moments, Lee and Richard, to talk about the office calendars and why they are so important in this case. The office calendars, and I'm referring to the big office calendars with lots of handwritten notations on it, they were the Bible. They indicated all the events that were taking place in the office, all the meetings, both for me and Stetch during the period 2008 through 2010. So if you want to find out what I was doing on a particular date, that was almost always placed on the calendar. If you want to find out where I was, who I was meeting with, whether I was in town, out of town, traveling, in Florida, or perhaps someplace else, you take a look at the office calendar and it will say so. How does it say so? My meetings, anything I was doing was almost always highlighted in pink. Why did they use pink? Because they had a pink highlighter. It was highlighted in pink. Anything that Stetch was doing was highlighted in yellow. Now, often you will see notations in Stetch's handwriting, but not always. She had folks working for her, whether it was Gia Sicaro, Audrey Coffin, Rachel, or somebody else. They would often make notations on the calendar. But almost always, anything relating to Stetch was in yellow. Anything relating to me was in pink. Now this is highly significant because you will see on the website under the section alibi, Richard, because for the longest time you were using the word alibi, even though I told you it didn't apply. Anyway, if you look at that section of the website, you will see an Excel analysis, which is also printed in PDF, that intensively goes through the entries on the calendar under names. Now, many of these were Guyanese and foreign names, so they might have been spelled and misspelled, and when you do a search in Excel, it's not always a simple task to find a name if it's been misspelled. But my analysis does go through particular names. For example, if you patch in the name Prahalad Mahadeo in the analysis, and I've done an analysis that takes into consideration every single Stetch entry on the calendar and every single Schwartz entry on the calendar. And if you want to see how many times Stetch met with Prahalad Mahadeo, you can find it. If you want to see how many times Stetch met with Das Ramos, and there was a person, Rose Das Ramos, that Stetch met with very often. Bardalis, you can see it on the calendar. Stetch was meeting with these people, highlighted in yellow. And go down the line. Bassi, Persad, pick a transaction, either end of the transaction, you will find a name, and you will see a contact between Stetch and that person highlighted in yellow. Adrian Freitas, a name that's very important in this case. Why? Because she stole over $170,000. There is a portion of the website, Richard, obviously you haven't seen it because you haven't visited the website. There is a portion of the website that analyzes the $170,000 that she stole. Just like there was a portion of the website that analyzes, very intensively analyzes, the monies that Prahalad Mahadeo stole. His nickname was Rishi. Did I see him in passing on a few occasions? Sure, I did, because he was in the office often enough. But I didn't know him. I never had any transactions with him. He's just somebody. I knew his face. And his father-in-law, his name is Bharat, Anand Bharat. And the two of them would act together. These were folks that were arrested back in 2010. The Queen's DA let them go for reasons that I would have no familiarity with. In any event, pick a name and you will find it on the calendar. You will see that it's highlighted in yellow, yellow versus pink. Pink is me, yellow is her. Now, what about the monies that I was paid? Well, the calendars were the way that Camille, he was my targeted person, he was my key person. He would go to the calendar, he would go to Stetch and see if something was in yellow and it said SS for short sale. It was a short sale, and he would go to Stetch. Stetch, did it close? Yes, no, maybe. And Stetch would tell him what checks to write based upon whether it closed or not. If she said it didn't close, he wouldn't write a check. If she said it did close, he would write a check. It was based upon her say-so. And there are some instances where she gave handwritten notes to Camille indicating what deals closed and what checks he should be writing. Towards the end, when we started to get involved in the grievance committee complaint on Sultan Khan and this back and forth as to other issues, because Steve Barrera, towards the end, had several meetings with Stetch where he wanted to clarify numerous points. She was unable to do so, and I was getting constant feedback from Steve Barrera. In any event, at that time, we were more sensitive to saving at least I was more sensitive to saving documentation, which I did. So we do have handwritten notes from Stetch, particularly in 2010, indicating the monies for legal fees, which she said were payable into the operating account. But the calendar would always show. If something was on the calendar, then yeah, you could look to that date or the day after, and you will see that a check was deposited for a particular closing. And notations were made normally in the bottom left of the check, because Camille would write the checks, and they would show that monies were being paid for a particular closing. And if the closing didn't happen, it didn't happen. The calendars were extremely important. Now, at some point, I told the office, I told Barrera, and I told Camille, mostly Steve Barrera, because he was dealing with David Numi. I said, please tap David Numi on the shoulder. Make sure he understands the significance of these calendars, because that is a crucial piece of evidence that you will most definitely need for trial. And he did. Now, the calendars were oversized. You couldn't copy them on one page, not on 8.5 by 14 or 8.5 by 11, and we didn't have a photocopier in the office that was capable of copying these pages in one piece. Steve Barrera took it upon himself, out of trust with David Numi, since they did have a working relationship and a rapport, and he gave him the calendars. He gave him the calendars without making copies beforehand. When he gave them the calendars, everything was bound. It was all on a spiral binding. 2008, 2009, 2010. He gave it to David Numi. He picked it up, but he didn't retain copies. So now, after I was indicted, I wanted the calendars. I wanted copies of the calendars. I leaned on Richard, you will recall, and I said, please contact Wright and get copies, colored copies of the calendars. And there did come a time when, Richard, you went down and you met with Wright, and you said, I believe you said, that all of the calendars were there and they were separated from the spiral bindings, and you made copies on your iPhone and you gave them to me, and I did my best to sort this out. It was not easy, since there are probably better ways to do the photocopying than taking out an iPhone, but I did it, and all of those copies, in whatever computer language they exist, perhaps TIFF, perhaps something else, are on the website. They're on the website, and I believe it's in a unique Apple program, and there are 5 months that are missing. Those 5 months are critical. Those 5 months relate to the period July 2009 through November of 2009. Why are they missing? I don't know. You got to ask Allison Wright and David Numi. July is very important. You'll find from July, that's when the paper signing for Liebert took place. Well, Liebert, Adrian Freitas, that whole mess, that's when it took place. July, I believe it was 15th of 2009 or 14th. On that date, if you looked at the calendar, you will see. I was not in the office the entire day. I was at the University of Pennsylvania Heart Hospital as my daughter Rebecca was undergoing a pre-op procedure in anticipation of heart surgery, which eventually did occur in January of 2010. It was a big deal. The procedure itself was over 8 hours. In any event, she had a very rare ablation. Nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to digest this. Why, I don't know, but that's where my mindset was. and that was the pre-op procedure was in July of 2009. How do I know where I was? Because on the website I have all of my records relating to Rebecca and her medical treatment. And I have records relating to the date of the Library signing. So I know that on that date I was not in the office. And Wright probably has that calendar. And although I'm not going to infer an evil mind on the part of Wright, although perhaps it is justifiable based upon what has occurred, she, like with everything else, is likely trying to gerrymander the evidence, because that date will show that I wasn't around. That date will show that Stetch had her paper signing with Liebert at that point, and Ken was not in the office. Now, July, August, September, October, November, these are all times when Stetch was likely meeting with people like Adrian Freitas. We do have in our analysis lots of other dates when Stetch met with Adrian Freitas, but that 5-month period would show a number of other meetings with Adrian Freitas, who ended up stealing $57,000 with Stetch out of the account in one fell swoop by a check signed by Stetch in May of 2010. In any case, the calendars are extremely important. We are missing 5 months. All of the calendars were ripped from the spiral bindings, mutilated. I don't know why. To my understanding, gentlemen, if you're the DA, you are not supposed to mutilate evidence. There's something in the evidentiary rules that say that a DA's office should not be mutilating evidence, tampering with evidence, but they did. Nobody's raising it. I don't know why. You need to stand and object. You need to tell the trial court that they mutilated the evidence. They ripped the calendars from the spiral bindings, so they were changed. And that is a crucial piece of evidence in this case. And because they ripped it from the spiral bindings, they lost 5 pages. How do you lose 5 pages on a critical exhibit, the single most important exhibit in the entire case? And they willy-nilly lost it. And they offer no explanation. Richard, you've been on this for 2.5 years and we haven't received any explanation. I've asked you many times to send letters, signed letters, not just to make phone calls, because folks ignore phone calls. They tend to pay some attention to emails. As recently as yesterday, the 14th of November 2016, I made a request that you kindly contact Wright by email and make another request for the 5 months. Don't know if you did, don't know if you didn't. Much of this case will rest upon those calendars. I can't stress too importantly that you need to raise the subject of mutilating the evidence, tampering with the evidence, and losing 5 months in the process. Please take a look at the website. Under the alibi section, you will see my analysis, which I did at length comparing the calendars to money stolen, the so-called Stetch associates, folks like Prahalad Mahadeo and Adrian Freitas. That is the heart and soul of this case. Please ask me your questions. I'm happy to talk to you, and thank you for listening. Bye-bye.